Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, who in Britain should decide what Brexit looks like? The government is clear, and it reiterated its position again today in a statement to the Commons. It has to negotiate withdrawal, and it has to decide what we negotiate. It says the mandate for Britain to leave the European Union is clear, overwhelming and unarguable. It also says it doesn't want any kind of obstruction from reluctant Remainers. So get out of the way, leave the three Brexiteers and Theresa May to it. But there is another view, which is that Parliament should have the say on what kind of deal we aim for. Now, it's mostly Remainers who want that, but it isn't exclusively Remainers, because this Tory MP voted to leave and trenchantly made his point today.
Nearly half of those who voted wanted no substantive change at all in the relationship between this country and the European Union. Their voices, although they did not chime with my own, appear entirely to have been forgotten in the rhetoric of hard Brexit, which has somehow become received wisdom on the part of the government. The government has no mandate for that. You cannot extrapolate from the result of the referendum the specific terms upon which the majority of those in this country wish their relations with the European Union now to be governed. And that can only be done by seeking a mandate from this House to which of the citizens of this country return honourable and right honourable members to express their view.
Well, our political editor, Nick Watt, is with me. Are the government going to stick to this? Are they going to remain resolute on this, Nick?
Well, very much so, but that impassioned plea from Stephen Phillips was actually rebuffed by the Speaker on the grounds that, look, the Labour Party is having a debate on this very matter on Wednesday, so let them get on with it. And there are some people who are quite taken by Stephen Phillips who say, actually, maybe that's a better option, because had he got his way, he would have knocked out that Labour debate and there would have just been a vote on a generalised motion. Instead, with that Labour debate, there will be a vote afterwards on a specific motion that is likely to call on the government to seek the consent of MPs and Parliament in its Brexit negotiations. And there are some Labour MPs and a small number of Conservative MPs who are saying maybe they will defeat the government. And that will obviously not amuse the Brexit Secretary, David Davis, who, as you say, had ruled out a vote in Parliament on those Article 50 negotiations.
It's a non-binding vote on Wednesday. Yes, it won't affect them. In terms of the substance of the negotiation, Nick, any extra news, any updates, anything we know that we didn't know?
Well, David Davis said he was going to update MPs on the next steps of the UK leaving the European Union, and true to his words, he covered a large piece. He played down the significance of the fall in sterling recently, and he gave a pretty strong indication that in his mind the UK would not remain a member of the single market, nor would it remain a member of the customs union. But some eyebrows were raised in Whitehall when he seemed to have a bit of a pop at the French President François Hollande and the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. You remember last week President Hollande said that the UK would have to pay a price for leaving to discourage others, and Angela Merkel said that if the UK wanted to remain in the single market outside the EU, it would have to accept free movement of people. So this is what he said in his exchange with Crispin Blunt about François Hollande.
What plans does he have to publicly enumerate the implications of there being no deal at the end of 2 years of negotiations?
Well, what I'll say to him at this point is that if the European Union adheres to a punishment plan and it fails, as I believe it would, then that's an even bigger incentive to countries that want to leave than a punishment plan or no punishment plan at all.
Now, one senior Whitehall source said to me this evening that by taking on Europe's two most powerful leaders, David Davis was displaying what this person described as an unhelpful swagger.
Nick, thank you very much. Well, joining me now, the Shadow Foreign Secretary Emily Thornberry and Bernard Jenkin, Conservative MP, who is one of the leading campaigners for Brexit. He also chairs the Commons Public Administration Committee. Emily Thornberry, how would the Commons express a view on a complicated, multidimensional negotiation? I mean, what form is that going to take? I mean, the Commons isn't very good at voting for multi-option, complicated things. It's sort of very binary, isn't it? How would it go about
No,
it?
I understand that, but our frustration is that we're getting no information from the government at all about how it is that they're going to negotiate Brexit. We start on the basis that we have instructions from the British people that they want us to leave. So we want to do our job properly, and we want to leave, which is in the best interest of the British people. Now, I don't think, and I really don't think this is right, that the Tories have a mandate to go into a locked room and fight it out amongst themselves and then decide which way they're going to leave Europe. It is the future of my children and my grandchildren that's at stake. It's the future of the economy, and we think that the government really ought to come to Parliament and put forward a plan, because although they're saying...
a plan before they negotiate it, and then you vote to take it or leave it.
And the point is, right, they say, oh, we're playing our cards close to the chest because we don't want to kind of undermine our negotiating position. But we know that they've got a whole load of different ideas. You know, what Hammond thinks is completely different to what May thinks, is completely different to what Fox thinks. And so on what basis are we going to Europe?
And it's different to what Bernard Jenkins
I'm
thinks.
sure it is. I'm sure
Come
it
on,
is.
how do you defend that? What is the mandate for the government just taking this ahead and doing it?
The mandate, well, it's the biggest ever vote cast for any single proposition in this country ever. And it's the mandate to leave the EU. And incidentally, the Leave campaign was very clear that leaving the EU meant leaving the single market.
Indeed.
And indeed, the Remain campaign repeatedly said, if you vote to leave the EU, we will have to leave the single market. So I don't see why there's any argument about this now.
Emily Thornborough.
Well, I mean, you say that, but I think what you're relying on, isn't it, is Michael Gove on one television programme saying that that we would have to leave the single market. I mean, the point was during the Brexit vote, it was not clear what the options were. Yes, you know, we were going to leave, but there are many different ways of leaving the European Union, and those options were not made clear. They were all contradictory. And you know, if you're relying on Michael Gove, remember, Michael Gove is the guy whose wife said you were only supposed to blow the blinking doors off. You know, so he wasn't even serious in terms of leaving anyway.
Let's have a serious discussion.
No, I mean, I am.
It's an important point here that we're not holding the Leave campaign to account for all its promises, because it's not giving us 350 million extra a week for the NHS, so we shouldn't let it say this is one thing, but we're not going to do that other thing. But I put it to you, Norway is not in the European Union, correct?
Correct.
So that is compatible, if we adopted the Norwegian option, that would be compatible with the vote that the public conducted.
Well, on this question of accountability...
Just answer the question.
Well,
it would be compatible with what the public voted for on June the 20th.
And the Norwegian model was one of the things
I'm not advocating. I'm just asking.
Neither the Leave campaign said the Norway option would not be our choice, and we made that clear. And the Remain campaign said the Norway option would be the worst of all possible worlds. So who was advocating in this referendum the Norway option? Nobody.
No, but the Swiss model is compatible with what the public voted for. The WTO model is compatible, and the Canadian model is compatible.
We can probably get a much better deal than the Swiss.
Right. So all of these models are compatible.
But if I can just make the one point...
Michael Gove was talking about Albanian model.
If I can make the one point about accountability, in Nick Watt's introduction to this discussion, he pointed out that there is a debate on Wednesday and there is going to be a vote. Now, you could have put down a vote about what kind of Brexit you want. You're not doing that. You're having a rather phony row about procedure instead.
It's not a phony
and we know
row.
that that's because your party is now far more divided than our party is on Brexit.
Nonsense.
Well, then why don't you discuss substance instead of procedure?
I tell you what, you guys are in government, right? If you want us to be in government, that's fine. We're more than happy to take over. But you guys, unfortunately, are in government. You have a new leader who's taking a new direction to Cameron's. She didn't even stand for leadership herself. She had no manifesto. She has no mandate. You know, it is not clear on what basis you're leaving, and it is right for us as the opposition to hold you to account, excuse me.
Okay.
And that's what we're doing. We're saying, tell us what your plan is. We want to have a debate. The British people need to know.
Right,
you owe it to the British people to tell us the basis on which you're taking us out of the European Union.
At the moment, the government is developing a plan. When the government has a fully fledged plan, I've no doubt it will be tabled.
But the implication is that Parliament won't get a say on that plan.
No,
and so the question is, you're saying...
That's not the case. I mean, for example, there's going to be a second reading to vote probably sometime in May or June on the repeal bill.
Well, that's
Now,
not the same point at all. And anyway, by that stage, you will have triggered Brexit.
No,
we need to have it before you trigger Brexit.
Well, if you want to have a
basis are
vote on whether we trigger Brexit or not,
No, we
lay
want
a
to know
motion.
the basis on which you're going
Lay
to
a
do
motion,
it,
say...
so that we know on the basis on which you're going into those negotiations. You have 2 years on triggering Brexit. We want to know the basis on which you're doing it. For example, what's your plan on migration? What's your plan on our continuing relationship with Europe? You know, are we going to be in the single market or aren't we going to? Because some of the Tories are saying that we ought to be in the single market.
I can answer those questions. The Prime Minister made it absolutely clear in her speech 2 Sundays ago that what migration policy we have as a country after we leave is a matter for the British Parliament. That's a separate matter from taking back control over migration, which is not negotiable. End of story.
Bernard Jenkins, can I just ask what you each think the majority view in Parliament would be? Let's accept there would be a majority for Remain, probably, if you asked MPs. But if you take the spectrum of options, for exit options, Brexit options, where would the majority be in Parliament, do you think?
I think the majority in Parliament, and I think the majority in the country, whether they voted to remain or whether they voted to leave, did not vote to take someone else's job away, did not vote vote to undermine the economy, and that is the priority.
Where do you think the majority in Parliament would be?
I think when it becomes clearer what the government is proposing as probably the only practical way forward, and when people understand that there isn't this Armageddon black hole in front of the country because we're leaving the European Union, I think the House of Commons will vote. The House of Commons will support the government's position. That's what I predict.
So whatever the government comes up with, the House of Commons will support. And if they won't, you won't put it to a vote anyway.
Because, well, I think there will be lots of votes. You're going to have a vote on Wednesday.
Yes, we won't know what your plans are. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get out of you some detail because we think that's what the public deserve.
Okay, we'll come back to this. We'll come back to this. It's a good one.
I think it's right. It's a procedural point she's arguing about.
It's absolutely about substance.
You're arguing your own time now.
You're arguing your own time. Go on then.
So, what has happened to our politics? The Tories now say they want to list foreign workers, a proposal dismissed by some of their own supporters as repugnant. The Labour Party is doing a pretty good job of trying to wrestle the nasty party tag off them. UKIP has taken to just, well, wrestling. And then in America, there's Trump. No one respects women more, he said last night, a comment which suggests he doesn't get out too much. But let's start with the Tories and immigration. At last week's Tory conference, the Home Secretary slightly stunned the assembled media and even some of her own supporters with what looked like a proposal to get companies to list the number of foreign workers they employ.
This government will not waver in its commitment to put the interests of the British people first.
The reaction was swift. Steve Hilton, a leading Leave campaigner, called it repugnant. The Home Secretary might as well announce that foreign workers will be tattooed with numbers on their forearms, he said. It all feeds into a broader debate about exactly what we did vote for in that referendum. When Leave campaigners say that we voted to control immigration, the answer has to be surely that they're right. Not only did they refer to it repeatedly during the campaign, it is actually in the Tory manifesto. But when they say that they want to take us out of the single market and even the customs union, the answer must surely be no. Not only did many Leave campaigners insist we could go on having access to the single market, even those that did not insisted we would be able to trade on similar terms. So, if some of us are going to lose our jobs, that's a whole different ballgame, isn't it? Well, listen, maybe we can come to the broader aspects of that in a minute, but can we just begin with immigration and what we've heard so far over the past few weeks? Ken, good or bad, what we've heard on immigration from the new government?
Well, it's been dropped already. I mean, I never could see...
Rode back from, not quite the same thing.
I couldn't see the point of getting everybody just to announce how many what the nationality was of their employees. Nobody else seems to know what the point was now, so apparently for some very, very useful purpose, this information is going to be collected privately. But I agree with you, it does touch on the whole question of how we handle immigration. Nobody's denying we should control immigration. The question is, what does control actually mean? Does it mean we're anti-immigrants? Are we turning them away? Do we have some funny figures in mind and so on? And I personally
What
reject
does it
any of
mean,
that.
in your view?
Well, what it means is that you do actually have to satisfy yourself that there's some legal reason for coming here, but that as we're in a globalised economy, as we're a major trading nation, we entirely expect there'll be lots of foreigners here, there'll be people working, we have lots of multinational, international companies. They won't be told what nationality their various people have got to be whilst they're doing a stint here. And a lot of the public didn't realise that the EU has nothing to do with who comes from Syria or Pakistan or wherever, and we already control that already.
Carol, do you agree with most of what Ken said?
Yeah, I do. I think it's absolutely true that you know, one of the reasons that people voted Brexit was not because they didn't want immigrants, because they wanted to control the numbers who came here and control the numbers. And I think, you know, in Amber Rudd's speech, I think I thought it was never, what she said was never going to work anyway. I thought it would be a bureaucratic nightmare to make that work. However, I do kind of understand the need to know who was here. You know, the whole point of Brexit is, you know, we will now be able to choose people from South America, from Australia, from China to do work. Before we couldn't do that. The EU limited us on that. In a way, it was discriminatory that, you know, we could take a Pole, but we couldn't take someone from India. Now we're going to be able to pick, if a company wants 20,000 more people, they're going to be able to pick the brightest and the best. And yes, those people will get visas, they will get national insurance numbers, they will pay their taxes, and the government will know who is here, how many are here, and what they're here for. And I think that's pretty good.
Clive, can I come to you? What polling I've seen, relatively limited, is that people actually like what Amber Rudd said. Of all parties, supporters of all parties, Labour, even SNP supporters liked it. So does the Liberal elite, since Theresa May doesn't like the Liberal elite much, just simply have to accept that people think differently outside of London and places like it on immigration?
Well, they would do to, I don't know who these Liberal elite are, but...
no, I can't imagine, but anyway.
I think you're assuming you're one of it, but...
I don't think I said that.
I could well bear in mind what ordinary people, if that's the alternative, should be. I'd be interested to know from Ken, would Amber Rudd, would that have been a frolic of her own? Would she have just come up with this way of putting it? Because
no, I don't know. Well, firstly, I mean, generally, I'm not mitigating what I said. I'm a fan of Amber Rudd. And she's quite liberal, and she's not remotely somebody who would just pander to anti-immigrant sentiment. So I have no idea where this all came from.
Speech sounded a little bit pandering.
Well, I haven't spoken to Amber, so she'll correct me if she hears what I've said, but I'm sure. But I think they were just thinking of something they could put in the speech to nod in the direction you're both indicating. But I think I would advise Amber to nod in the opposite direction as well. Of course, there has to be some limit to the people we can take, but you've got to know how you're going to get there and who exactly it is you're excluding. And somebody's got to point out that the vast majority of the non-British citizens living in this country are contributing, not taking anything out of the country. It's the fact that nobody's dared to say that for the last several years that encourages. It was Nigel Farage who had this bright idea of winning votes by blaming the EU for all the foreigners.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I'm the only immigrant on this panel, and even though I come from America, they tend to call us expats. I have no idea why, but I'm an immigrant, and I've lived here half my life. And one of the things I've held on to as an immigrant, because you do hold on to your things when you go to a new country, is something from your home. And my home is my accent, so I haven't lost the way I speak, and I don't intend to. But I've lived here for 30 years. And one of the things that I've noticed that fascinates me still is the kind of peculiar and very interesting, and I think brilliant, balance of the shambolic and rigid that's kind of British society. And somehow these two things are coming together in Brexit. We made a decision, and I believe in the will of the people. I'm a passionate Remainer, but the people have spoken, and we don't need another vote. I definitely am for that, but we do live under the rule of law. And the fact that people are suddenly talking about the will of the people, well, the will of the people exists in Parliament. And the fact that people are now parliamentarians are seeming to not want to have Parliament itself get involved as our elected will in Parliament. This country fought 2 civil wars so that Parliament can make the decisions for the people. You fought wars against this notion of royal prerogative and executive. And it's very important because as we proceed through, we do need the checks and the balances and the scrutiny of our elected representatives.
Okay. Can I just bring in one more thing here, because I want to move on to talking about Brexit more generally. We saw Steve Hilton and his views there earlier. I spoke to him in San Francisco a short time ago, and I just asked him to expand a little bit on his criticisms of the government today. And don't forget, Steve, a former close aide of David Cameron, was a very prominent Leave campaigner.
In the referendum campaign, I made an argument, and so did all the other Conservatives who were arguing for Leave, for what I would call an open Brexit, which is a positive, optimistic vision of a country that's globally focused, engaging with the whole world, not just Europe, welcoming to top talent from around the world, at the same time as controlling our own borders. And it seems to me that Theresa May is going in exactly the opposite direction, and in a very dangerous direction, towards a kind of closed Brexit that is pessimistic and negative and dark. And I think that could be a real disaster for the country.
Are you saying you want Mrs May to come forward and apologise for that particular policy and what you're suggesting that it indicated as to her mindset?
I think that Theresa May needs to send a really clear signal to the world that this idea that has been noticed around the world, this idea of forcing companies to name and shame foreign workers, was a mistake. I don't think that it's necessary to apologise, but just to acknowledge that it was a mistake. And I think a very powerful way of doing that would be to move the minister who made the announcement. Not for any personal reasons. I'm sure Amber Rudd is very, very good and will do a good job in another place. But I think that it's important to correct this mistake because it has had a big impact on Britain's reputation around the world.
Steve Hilton there, moving it up a few notches by calling for Amber Rudd to be sacked or moved.
Like the England football manager, you get a couple of weeks and off you go.
Can I come to you, Carol? Do you feel Brexit is bluntly being handled well?
Yes, I do. And, you know, with all respect to Steve Hilton, he has to understand, as do a lot of Remain people have to understand, that Theresa May doesn't care what he thinks. She doesn't care what politicians think. She doesn't care what the liberal elite thinks. She cares what the British people think. And she's made that really clear. She feels she's answerable.
But the British people are in this group of people. Remain was 48%.
Yeah, I know, but it was still 17.4 million.
No, but you know what? Listen, it's very important. I think that those of us who voted Remain are made to feel as if we're some sort of alien force who are outside of this whole idea.
But you're not, and I don't think that's what she's doing. I think what she's doing is being quite strong now. She's putting her markers down. She's saying this is what the people voted for, because it is. We weren't asked to vote for a soft Brexit or a hard Brexit. We were asked to vote for Brexit, and people did.
But did we vote for leaving the single market, if that's what it comes to? Because this is, in the end, when you strip away all the rhetoric, what it basically comes down to is we might have to leave the single market to control immigration in the way that she wants.
If she can prove she's got a plan that's going to work, well, yes, let's leave the single market, and we will hear her plan in a short period of time. But, you know, we can't be telling the Prime Minister how to run her government from the outside on a matter that has already been decided by the British people.
You don't think she has a mandate to leave the single market?
About the only thing that both sides were agreed on, the referendum, was that we wanted the freest possible trade with the whole world, including Europe. And all the Brexiteers agreed with all the Remain people that we must have free access to the market and so on. The disagreement was, people like me said, if you're going to do that, you've got to accept the rules of the market.
Exactly.
And if you do that, you're going to be expected to pay a contribution to the budget. And they said, as what Steve Hilton said, no. We're so important to them that they will let us continue to have free trade, but we won't have to take their foreigners, we won't have to take Germans and French and Italians into England unless we want them, and we won't have to pay anything. And I don't believe that. Well, we'll see who's right when the negotiations get underway.
So
but otherwise, there was no vote for anything. There was a big, broad question on both sides.
But just to be clear, in your view, she's getting it wrong to date.
No, but she hasn't done anything yet. I mean, I listened before I came here to a statement in the House of Commons from David Davis, and I'm not saying this critically, because nobody on the Brexit side was actually clearly in favour of anything, and they all have different views about what it means. So at the moment the government's working on it. Personally, I hope they take a long time. They've got till March. At the moment they don't actually what the position is they want to achieve. And if they still believe we can stay in the single market, I'm delighted. The single market will be a very much poorer country in future, and my children and grandchildren will be poorer. That's what worries
Clive has
me.
a solution. No, I'm asking
Clive,
if the solution that the government will eventually work out what it's going to do, hard Brexit, soft Brexit, lightly boiled exit, whatever it is, and then they'll put that forward as a policy. And that may be an opportunity at a time when they really ought to call an election and say, right, we now seek the endorsement of the populace again.
There should be an election.
Unfortunately, if that government, her government is then thrown out, then I don't know where we'd be then.
But there should be a mandate. The people should speak about what this thing looks like, because we are having 65 million people are having their citizenship taken away and their children's citizenship taken away. And this was not in the package that Leave presented to us.
Well, would you agree that might be a solution before we start the Article 50 proceedings? We have a general election just to say this is...
I think funnily enough, she's...
I think you should first try it out on Parliament, because the idea that you had a general election and the general election entirely turned on the details of a trading negotiation with the rest of the European Union, it would be the most remarkable, erudite election that I ever recall. The election would be about whether you like Jeremy Corbyn's choice of shoes, whether you think Theresa looks competent.
Do you? No, sorry, that's a different
other
question.
things would come in. The government does have a serious core to it, and you can't just get everybody getting their tablets out and pressing buttons and telling you what to do about things like trading negotiations with 27 other countries.